Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Tuesday, May 11th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. We'll talk about the upcoming NHL Playoffs. We'll talk quickly about this week's golf tournament, the AT&T Byron Nelson at a new course down in Texas. Maybe we'll work in some NASCAR at Dover, maybe talk a little bit of Preakness on today's show as well. Lots of stuff coming your way in rapid fire fashion here on this edition of ATS Radio. My daily MLB article will be on hiatus from tomorrow until next Tuesday, but a good breakdown of all the games here for today, May 11th, with 5 suggested picks for me in that article. Got the situational articles up over there at the website. UFC 262 preview is up. Golf tournament preview is up. Lots of stuff going on for you to check out over there at the website. And make sure you download the ATS app, which you can find in the Google Play Store or in the Apple Store. A bet tracker, an odds screen, stats database, article integration from the website. You can buy a subscription to the premium model. Lots of things going on in that ATS app for you to check out. With that, we bring on today's guest. That is Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. And Brian, how's it going today, man?
All right, bud. Crazy. I mean, there really is. It's like we've settled in. There's a lot going on. You know, like marquee thing. I don't know. And we got the PGA coming up in a couple of weeks, but there's just an army of stuff coming up. It's going to be good.
Yeah, a whole lot of things.
Like I did a couple of videos for you, which I think were fun and interesting for the NFL offensive and defensive rookies of the year, which just to me means with all we got going on right now that football's really not that far away.
No, it's really not. And I'll get those 2 videos posted this afternoon. And in fact, coincidentally, and works out very well here, I actually wrote up a couple of articles over the weekend about the offensive and defensive rookie of the year odds. So I'll be able to put those videos in those 2 articles that I've written. I saw NFL season win totals went out yesterday as well at one of the U.S. sports books. Not sure which one, but yeah, we're starting to think football. NHL playoffs begin on Saturday. NBA playoffs, that'll start I believe next Tuesday or next Wednesday, something like that. Then, of course, all these golf tournaments, NASCAR, UFC stuff. Very busy time of year here, to say the least. And, Brian, we got a handful of regular season games left in the NHL. 2 tonight, 5 on Wednesday, 3 on Thursday, 1 Friday, 1 Saturday. And then we've got Calgary and Vancouver presumably playing out the string here from Sunday to Wednesday of next week. We'll see if those games wind up even getting played. But in these last remaining regular season games here, Brian, you and I were talking about it before the show that a lot of things are decided. Every playoff team is decided already, but there are some seeding considerations left in play over the next 3 days.
Yeah, and actually right here in Vegas, it was kind of a big development on Monday night when Colorado held off the Golden Knights and won 2-1. Colorado basically grabbed control of their destiny again. They have 2 games left with the Kings. Vegas has a game at San Jose, but basically Vegas was just, if they could win in regulation, not only would they have won the West, they'd have won the President's Trophy. And now Colorado, 2 games against the Kings. They're going to be a big favorite in both of those games. So the West becomes really wild in terms of Colorado could grab the division now, and that would mean a first-round matchup with St. Louis. Maybe be careful what you wish for, because Colorado plays great against Minnesota. Vegas really struggles against Minnesota. So there's actually, these are interesting games with a lot riding on it here at the end of the regular season, specifically in the West. Basically, the other divisions, we know the participants with some jockeying for home ice and, a handful of waiting to find out exactly what the series will look like. But for the most part, we know the big picture.
Yeah, for sure. And, we already have our first playoff series scheduled, and that's Boston and Washington starting here on Saturday. Ironically enough, those 2 teams play each other tonight in a game that does not matter at all whatsoever. So we'll see what kind of lineup Washington puts out. With, Oshie's been kind of in and out of the lineup, the passing of his father. He's kind of been battling some injuries. Ovechkin's been out. Backstrom's been out. And Washington up against the salary cap, much like what happened to Vegas last night. They just don't really have the ability to call players up. So Teams have been playing with 15 guys, 18 guys, shortened rosters here. It's been absolutely ridiculous for the most part at the tail end of the regular season here. But Brian, I guess with that series already scheduled, and as I said, that meaningless game here tonight between Boston and Washington, since that one's already on the docket for us, what do you think about that series here where Boston 4-1-2 against Washington so far in the regular season?
I really thought Washington was kind of flying under the radar, built to do good things in the playoffs. The goaltending now, it's a bit of a question mark if Vinacek's the kid, the guy they're going to go with. But from a leadership perspective, power play with Ovechkin, back class, recently won a cup. I thought Washington was kind of flying under the radar. That being said, Boston, they just win. You know, you look at them some nights, you go, how do they do this? Well, they just win. And they're very top heavy. There's clearly a defined edge in goal for Boston coming into the series. And the real question mark, and you add to the list, it's a mash unit. Wilson got hurt. He got banged on the knee the other night. So, you know, there's not much time for these guys to, you know, put Band-Aids on their boo-boos. So Washington's coming in not 100%. So it actually leans a little bit. Well, maybe even more than a little bit. You would lean Boston's way. I'm a fan of Washington, but they're not healthy.
Well, and something else I think is really interesting to talk about here, especially with all the familiarity between these two teams having played each other a ton here during the regular season. Washington games averaged about 6.4 goals per game. Boston games about 5.5. And you talk about, you know, the kind of the style of play that you'd like to have in the playoffs. You would think Boston, with that very tight defensive style, they play a lot of lower scoring games. They're better in net than Washington, as you mentioned. Would you prefer that kind of slow it down, not a lot of transition style that Boston plays, or kind of the more wide open, freewheeling style of Washington?
Well, it would come down to who actually dictates the style, which style wins out. I do believe Washington is capable of playing both ways. And, you know, if their power plays clicking with Backstrom and Ovechkin and Carlson, you know, they can win games with special teams. But you can't not shine the spotlight on the goalie matchup that you're going to have, you know, Rask against Vinacek. So Boston kind of gets a running head start every game, to be honest with you.
Well, then in the other series coming out of that East Division, kind of a similar thing where, you know, Pittsburgh, they've scored 196 goals, a lot of offense for them. The Islanders, they've only scored 156. So 40 fewer goals for the Islanders, but they also allowed 28 fewer goals, 128 goals allowed for the Islanders, the second lowest in the NHL, only Vegas better in that department. It's just the style of play that Barry Trotz's team has. What do you think about Penguins Islanders in that first round matchup, Brian?
Well, I mean, it's pretty similar to what we just got done talking about. I love the Islanders. Their grit, the structure, the coach. Varlamov is a monster, but who's going to score? Now, that's been their case for a long time. They made the trade. They got Palmieri. They got Zajac over from Jersey, and neither guy has really been that impactful. But I think the games are correlated. I think Islanders win low-scoring games. Penguins can win high-scoring games. You know, Pittsburgh, it's a remarkable season. And you're sitting there going, well, they're just outscoring teams because their goaltending is really just downright ordinary. But it's the Islanders' inability to score that is really, really the red flag. I mean, this is a team, if they had a handful of guys, I mean, it's not like, you know, I love this Cizikas kid. Well, you're talking a kid on the third line that you're sitting there drooling over, that he's a great player in the postseason. You know, guys like that are going to have to step up to light the lamp for the Islanders. Can they contain the offense of Pittsburgh? They've got the goaltending to do it. They're just nights I just see they won't be able to shoot it in the ocean. You know, if you'd have talked to me at the beginning of the year, I'd say, I take the Islanders in a heartbeat. But man, they are just really squeezing the stick offensively.
Well, and something else I think is really interesting about that series here, Pittsburgh 22-4-2 at home, just 15-12-1 on the road. The Islanders at home 21-4-3, just 11-13-4 on the road. So both of these teams faring much, much better on home ice. Pittsburgh obviously gets it by virtue of winning the division, but maybe this is one where the home teams hold serve, at least based on what we've seen from their home road splits so far.
Oh, no, it's a compelling matchup. It really is offense versus defense. But you sit there and say, by a good margin, the Islanders have the goalie. But, I mean, how do you sneeze at saying Sidney Crosby's on the other side? It's a coin flip. It really is. I think that's a terrific series. At the moment, I'm really leery of the Islanders' ability to score. And even though you're going to be facing a great goaltender, the back class of guys like Crosby and Malkin and, Letang, beyond that, it's kind of role guys for Pittsburgh. But, I mean, I think even if a goalie's standing on his head, the Pittsburgh can get, 2 or 3 a night. And I can't say that about the Islanders any night.
Well, as we look at the Central Division here, there's no better first-round series. I don't care what happens in the West Division. There's no better first-round series than Florida and Tampa Bay. Panthers have ripped off 6 in a row to finish second here in this division. They will be at home against Tampa Bay whenever that series starts. Tampa Bay struggling a little bit down the stretch here. They've dropped 3 straight, but we all know the talent level that the Lightning have. So now what a great first-round matchup this is, Brian.
Well, there's no doubt. And you would say, well, the big winner in all of this is Carolina. But Nashville, 7-2-1 in their last 10, and those are always the dangerous teams that played playoff hockey just to get in, and they can be dangerous. Before the season started, there were no conferences per se, but on the premise, what we had done in the past, my top 2 picks were Carolina and Colorado. So I'm a big fan of Carolina. In Florida, with Quenneville, it's one of these things where, like, okay, they're there, but the Panthers are the Panthers, and always in the last month of the season, they kind of wane. Well, not only did they not wane, they went nuts, and they handled the Lightning heads up. They're on a 6-game winning streak coming in. So the X factor here really is Quenneville, but the Lightning have backlash, and boy, oh boy, I'm telling you, they don't like each other, and I think it's great for hockey that all of a sudden that regional rivalry actually becomes a rivalry because both teams are good.
To me, I think the biggest question in this series, and it does seem like Chris Driedger is going to be the starter here for the Panthers in this series, I would think. I don't think they go with Bobrovsky. I don't think they go with the youngster and Spencer Knight. The question is, can he perform on the same level as Andrei Vasilevsky? I think the goaltending could be the major X factor in that series. And Tampa Bay they play such a tremendous style of hockey. They're almost always in control of the game. I know they've kind of slipped up a little bit here late in the season, but to me, even though Florida comes in the hotter team, I need them to prove it to me. I would have to take Tampa Bay in this series, if anything.
Oh, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And on top of it, and we're waiting to see what it looks like, but does Kucherov parachute out of the sky onto the ice? The MVP from last year.
I believe I did see on Twitter that Kucherov and Stamkos are expected to play in the playoffs, at least at the start.
Imagine that. Okay, the playoffs are started. Let's see. What can we do to, just shore things up? Well, how about the league MVP shows up for the first game of the year? Talk about a team getting a jump and a bounce.
No, absolutely. Let's take a look at a couple of these other divisions here real quickly. Now, these ones aren't set in stone, like the Central and the East are. All the Central and East playoff pairings have already been decided. We know Toronto is the number 1 seed in the North. Edmonton is the number 2 seed. Still waiting to see who the 3 and 4, or how the 3 and 4 set up between Winnipeg and Montreal. Both of them have already clinched playoff spots, and both of them playing really poorly. Winnipeg's lost 9 of 10. Montreal's lost 4 in a row. So it doesn't seem like either one of these teams playing all that well here down the stretch. And Brian, I mean, maybe we can kind of keep this short, but I mean, is there any way that Toronto and Edmonton don't meet in that second round?
Sure. Sure. It would be, if this actually happened, it would be the most typical Toronto thing ever, where they've been really, really, really good. And the goaltending is, okay. The defense is okay. But their offense is ridiculous. But basically, for weeks and weeks on end, they were going to play Montreal, and they handle Montreal. And Montreal's not been playing that great, and they're in free fall. All of a sudden, Winnipeg is falling out of the sky. 1-9 in their last 10. It's ugly. It's hideous. But when the playoffs begin, it's a new season. Everybody starts 0-0. If Montreal ever passed Winnipeg, they're only a point behind. Winnipeg's got 2 left. Montreal's only got a game left. If Winnipeg fell to the 4th spot in the North and ended up hooking up with Toronto, you got Hellebuck. And believe me, as bad as Winnipeg has been, he's a goaltender that can win a series. So I think Winnipeg, even though they look like they have run for the bus, flip a switch, act like none of it's all happened in the past. You start punching each other in the mouth. If you've got the better goalie, you still got a chance. I think Winnipeg is the danger in the North.
All right. As we take a look at the West Division here, the only thing that's decided is that St. Louis will be the number 4 seed. Minnesota plays St. Louis twice. Colorado plays the Kings twice, as you mentioned. And Vegas has 1 game left here against San Jose. Squandered the opportunity to go ahead and take care of their affairs last night and take down the top spot in this West Division. So with that in mind, just sort of break this all down for us in terms of, what you think about the potential matchups. Obviously, there's big incentive to win this division and play St. Louis, who is far and away behind the other 3 teams here in this division. So just kind of, how do you see this first round shaking out? And, as somebody out there in Vegas, I mean, who do they not want to see in the first round?
Well, I would say this to you. I put a future on St. Louis at 55-1 3 weeks ago. They are far behind in the standings, but St. Louis is 6-1-3 in their last 10, recently won a Stanley Cup, and Binnington's playing lights out. They are not a walkover in any way, shape, or form. Vegas has really struggled with Minnesota since the day they've come into the league. It's about the only team that's been their kryptonite. Colorado owns Minnesota. So how this shakes out in the final couple of games, there's a big part of me says Colorado, wins these 2 games against the Kings. And I would listen, Vegas plays San Jose tomorrow night. San Jose's I would think possibly their numbers up for that game. Let me real quick look. I would venture a guess there are. Let's see. Tomorrow, is it up yet?
Yes.
Vegas at San Jose. Vegas is minus $1.95.
Yeah.
It's Fleury's turn to play. But I think you can make a case. Vegas was really banged up, only went with the 10 forwards last night. DeBoer was frustrated after the game. San Jose hates Vegas. San Jose, I could honestly see San Jose going, come on, this is our playoff game. Let's cost these guys the division. I can actually see San Jose showing up in this game, and I think Vegas has a bit of a letdown off the letting the game get away against Colorado. I think, honestly, San Jose may be a danger to them even tomorrow night, but it's Colorado, I think, minus 345, 2 games at home against the Kings to win the President's Trophy. And Grubauer played lights out in Vegas. I'd be hard-pressed to see LA winning one of those games, to be honest with you.
So who comes out of that whole thing here, do you think, in that West Division? I mean, do you think it's still Colorado?
Yeah, I mean, the Vegas and Colorado are dead even. And there's nice sometimes Colorado, it just doesn't seem right. and I'm not as high on Colorado now as I had been. I mean this sincerely. I think St. Louis is a threat. Bennington is playing terrific, and they just won a cup a couple of years ago. And this is eerily similar to how they won the cup the last time. I'm not saying they're winning the cup. I'm not saying they're getting out of the West. But they are. You're not going to roll over these guys. I mean, if you look at the disparity in the standings and you go, oh, yeah, well, yeah, Vegas, 80 points, and St. Louis only has 59. You're thinking, it should be a $4 favorite. That is not the case here. St. Louis is actually a real dangerous team. And Minnesota, don't sleep on what they've done. That team with the Kaprizov kid, they don't have an ounce of quit in them. And if Colorado were to win this division, Vegas could really be kicking themselves, because those are great games, but Minnesota just believes they can beat Vegas. The West is really intriguing. I think in the regular season, it was flat out boring with Arizona, the Kings, the Sharks, and the Ducks in there. And I think everything's been easy to a degree for the top teams because it's such a top-heavy division. But now we're talking meat and potatoes.
All right, good thoughts there on the NHL playoffs, and we'll update that as they go forward here on ATS Radio. But I want to get over to the golf side of things here real quickly for the AT&T Byron Nelson. And this is down at TPC Craig Ranch, a new course here. This is a course that has hosted the Nationwide and Web.com Tour finales, part of the Q School as well. But it turns out that the players did not like Trinity Forest. They had a 4-year agreement with the PGA Tour, which the PGA Tour backed out of after 2 years. Last year's tournament, of course, canceled because of COVID-19. So now we go to TPC Craig Ranch for the last event in advance of the PGA Championship next week at the Ocean Course at Kiowa Island. Bryson DeChambeau, your 8-1 co-favorite with John Rahm. Jordan Spieth, 11-1. Dustin Johnson was in this field, but withdrew, citing some knee pain. So that kind of bumped down some of the other guys, like Daniel Berger at 17-1. Scotty Scheffler, 19. Masters champ Hideki Matsuyama at 20. Bunch of guys on down from there. But, Brian, we got a lot of guys that haven't played a lot lately. We got a lot of guys mostly just looking to kind of fix some things going into the PGA Championship next week. And we've got a new course that we don't really know anything about. So what are you doing with this tournament this week?
Well, Sung Kang is the defending champion. And as you said, they didn't play this tournament last year. The irony is Sung Kang's the defending champion, and the tournament's moving to his home course. He's a member at this club. So
I'm just 350-1.
I'm just saying, it's interesting. I always, when they're in Texas, I think you have to look at guys from Texas and for a starting point. And you look at the guys up top. DeChambeau, he just flew home to Dallas halfway through the tournament in Charlotte. So DeChambeau's sleeping in his own bed. Spieth's 9-1. Rahm's here. Matsuyama, I believe, at 20-1. I would be fading him in matchups. We talked about this on my show yesterday with you. Guys that win the first major, something like the Masters, and he's an older guy. I don't think he'd be as prone to it as maybe some of the other guys. But I think the air will be out of the balloon for a while with a guy like Matsuyama. If he comes back and wins, God bless him. But I'd be looking to fade him. Zalatoris everybody talks about him week in, week out. He's from Dallas. Scotty Scheffler at 20-1. I hate the price, but Scotty Scheffler, we know what he did in the match play in Austin. Also, Sergio played well in Austin. He lives in Austin. Sergio's a guy worth a peek at 40-1. Ryan Palmer's another Texas guy who's always there, but he just can't win. I mean, if they give you a guy to lead the first round, put Ryan Palmer in there and see what happens on Sunday's the problem. But I got some other guys. I think Westwood was on a crazy run, and like, my God, you're like, how is he sustaining this week after week after week after week? And his wife was on the bag, and it was it was really impressive. Westwood from England, he plays a low ball flight. I think he can handle the winds in Texas. I think Westwood's worth a peek at a nice price. And I threw a grenade in there, Sebastian Munoz at 110-1. But I think you do look at the guys from Texas though, and there are many unknowns, as you said, because we don't know the course. So, as I always do, I'll swing for some larger plays. Watch Thursday, Friday, and Friday night. Say I found my guy, and hope I was right on the front end that I'm a contender with the long shot.
Yeah, and something else I thought was kind of interesting about this tournament here, you've got guys like Peter Uihlein, Antoine Rosner, you've got John Catlin, guys that have come over from the European Tour that have had wins recently or have at least been playing very well, coming over stateside in advance of the PGA Championship. And those are guys that, are at big triple-digit prices here in this tournament as well. I'll throw three names out to you here. Matthew Fitzpatrick's 21-1. I know you kind of threw some cold water on my thoughts on him on your show yesterday.
No, I love him. I hate the price.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think Fitzpatrick's a guy who, he drives the ball well. He's very good strokes gained approach. And you kind of default to some of those usual stats on a course that you don't really know. So Fitzpatrick was one that I looked at. Ryan Palmer, you mentioned a Texas guy. He's a guy that I took a piece of this week. Also, Doug Gim, who's top 10 in strokes gained approach. So, a guy that was playing pretty well at the Masters before he kind of completely fell apart. But a guy that, I think he's got the iron play to maybe be dangerous here on a course that a lot of guys won't really know. As I mentioned, Sung Kang was 350-1. He's down to 275-1 at DraftKings now. So somebody must have realized that he's a member here and kind of made a play. The last guy I'll mention here, 150-1, runner-up in the web.com final back in 2012 at this course, James Hahn. 150-1's not a bad look, I don't think, here for James Hahn. So kind of throwing some darts around the board here for this one. Not really sure how this course plays out. But next week, the PGA Championship should be a much more interesting event. The last thing I'm going to mention here real quickly is I bet Brooks Koepka to miss the cut at 2-1. So no at plus 200. The only event he's played is the Masters. He played the first 36 holes, missed the cut, didn't look particularly good moving around, trying to get some reps in here in advance of the PGA Championship. But man, you talk about guys that are rusty and coming off the shelf. I don't know how you can expect Koepka to do a whole lot this week.
Okay, I'll throw one at you. The three guys I played, I just want to double check what I actually did. I got Westwood at 65. I did take a little flyer at 120-1 on Munoz. But the one that I said, how do you pass this up? And, when you watch the broadcast and you're an idiot like me and, you watch the golf so religiously, Keith Mitchell, he was right there last week. It looked like he was home and cooled, but, he had to play with McIlroy in the final round. McIlroy stared him down. McIlroy gets the win. But in that tournament, and it's escaping me, I could look it up, but whoever Mitchell's partner was in the team tournament, the Zurich Open, his partner was texting. Who was it he was texting? It was either, was it Faldo? Maybe it was Faldo or somebody on the broadcast. And the guy that was his partner in the Zurich Open said, if that was a regular event, that wasn't a team event, he said Mitchell would have won by 10 shots. He said, I dragged him down. He said, I've not seen a guy drive the ball like Mitchell. And he's in terrific current form, and he's 55-1. All these guys that are, like you said, Koepka's 22-1. Well, Mitchell coming in with a form cycle, to me, is a way better play than a Koepka, Fitzpatrick, or a Berger off the shelf. Watch out for Mitchell just because he's in that window of really good form.
That's fair. I know you talk about those form cycles a lot, and it is something that you pay very close attention to. One thing I want to ask you about here, Brian, and we don't have post-position draws. I know you don't have past performances in front of you yet, but the Preakness
Hey,
can
I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
1 second. Don't hate me. A pretty good event over in Europe on the European Tour. It's the British Masters. And the couple guys I took a shot with, I just felt compelled to throw this out there. Jamie Donaldson at 41-1, Eddie Pepperell at 40-1. Two Brits that in Donaldson's form is coming back. He was a hot potato about 3 years ago, and we know golf, when you lose it, you lose it. But Donaldson's back in pretty good form. And I took a swing with Jorge Campillo at 100-1. There's a Spaniard who's he's capable of making some noise. But this week is actually I love the European Tour. I watch it a lot on the weekend, but this is actually a really good tournament. And one I just maybe think, to a degree, if you like betting golf, pay attention to the European Tour a little bit because some of their bigger tournaments are coming up. But this one, don't sleep on the Brits making noise on their home court.
All right. No, good thoughts there.
I'm sorry.
Opportunities. No, it's fine. Not a problem at all. I do want to ask you about the Preakness Stakes here real quickly. The post draw today at 4:00 Eastern time. So that'll be right while you're doing Vegas Hockey Hotline out there at 1:00 Pacific. What are we looking for here? I'm not sure if you've looked at the entries, kind of handicap this race at all here so far, but what are you kind of looking for in terms of the Preakness draw? Is there, a post that you want a horse to get? Are you starting to kind of put together your thoughts on this one?
Well, the short answer is no. I'm waiting to see how this whole thing with Medina Spirit plays out. Pimlico, it's a shorter race, 1 3/16. Generally, it's speed favoring, and Medina Spirit would be very much part of the equation again. The real rub with this, there's a lot of things about this that are just nauseating, black eye for the sport. But you had 4 across the track in the Derby. You're like, oh my God, this will be a great Preakness field. And a lot of these horses just say, hey, we're going to freshen up and go to the Belmont, and you're going to get some new shooters in here. But Rock Your World was the one that was 9-2 when the bell rang at Churchill, who would have been on or near the lead with Medina Spirit, and the horse got wiped out in the starting gate. I really thought they'd come back with Rock Your World. And I said I thought Rock Your World would actually be the favorite in this race. But the way it all played out, everybody just said, now we're going to freshen up for the Belmont. Now you got this thing going on with Medina Spirit and how this all gets sorted out. The post position draws this afternoon at 4 Eastern. What's ultimately going to happen with this horse? I think Baffert says he's not going. If the second test comes in positive, does Maryland uphold the suspension for Baffert, which means and then they try to say, well, the horse can't run. Well, then the lawyers get involved and say, well, we can run the horse under somebody else. And then they're going to be poking and prodding this horse. It'll be like a piñata before the race, testing him before the race. It's just ugly in a lot of ways, but it may set it up for something stupid to happen this week. But to be perfectly honest, at the time of our taping, we'll do a video for you. But we got to see how this thing all unfolds. Then we got to see the post position draw. And I think a new shooter may absolutely be in play.
Well, and it's one of those things, too, where, Medina Spirit, if entered in this race, looks like a pretty sizable favorite based on some of the morning, the look-ahead line odds that we've seen and all that, where you're kind of seeing something like Concert Tour as the second favorite in that 8 or 9-1 range. So this looks to be a very wide open race if Medina Spirit's not in it. So, maybe that high degree of variance kind of gives us some opportunities here in this short race. But the one big takeaway for me, Brian, is that this looks like it's going to be one of the least compelling Preakness Stakes that we've had in a long time.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing. Why did this take so long? You tested the horse 2 weeks ago. Well, why did this take so long?
Yeah, I don't know.
So, if this is found out the day after the race, what's Mandaloon thinking? We'll run that horse because the Triple Crown's dead. You know what I mean? If this ruling or this test came back, if it happened on Monday or Tuesday after the Derby, now you got 2 weeks. So you think Mandaloon isn't running in this race?
Yeah,
I don't understand what the hell took so long.
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a really good question. The one thing I will say is it's setting up for an outstanding Belmont, but we got 3 weeks of time until we kind of wait and see what that field looks like, and we will talk about that at that point in time here as well. But real quick, NASCAR at Dover, from one kind of horsepower to another. NASCAR at Dover on the mile track here for the Drydene 400. And I don't know, man. This one looks pretty simple to me, where Martin Truex Jr. over his last 10 races has averaged a top 5 finish. 2 wins, 8 top 5s, 4.3 the average finish for Truex. Larson, a win and 5 top 5s over his last 8 races here. Harvick, a couple of wins, 5 top 5s. I don't think we're going to get any kind of surprise winner here this weekend at Dover, Brian.
Well, I think in the next few weeks, what you look for, and you brought up a great point, there's road courses are coming, but there's 3. 2 I know it's going to happen. The other one, I'm not so sure, and that's Elliott's yet to win, and he's great on the road courses. Hamlin's been knocking on the door, has yet to win. And points-wise, these guys are going to be fine, but you don't want to leave anything to chance. It's Harvick that remains the mystery. And the one guy, Larson, I think runs good every week now. So actually, Larson might not be a bad play to win the whole thing because he's real competitive each and every week. But I'd be looking for Elliott and Hamlin to win in the very near future.
Yeah, the only 3 weeks where Larson's been uncompetitive, the Daytona road course, the Bristol dirt race, and Talladega, which, you can draw a line through at least 2 of those because the dirt race was kind of a shit show. And then Talladega, obviously, we all know how that kind of goes. I wouldn't expect Larson to do well on the road courses here coming up, but on the oval tracks, he's very good. He'll be dangerous at Charlotte, much like Chase Elliott will. So, I like Elliott. I think Larson's got a good chance this week, but Elliott's probably my favorite play of the week, and it is hard to look away from Truex, with the 3 wins. He led the most laps at Bristol in the dirt race, even though he didn't win it. He's just been great week in and week out for the most part. So, I don't know. I'm not going too far down the board here this week, I guess, is the overall takeaway here.
Yeah, the Truex thing, that was hilarious, by the way, last week. I don't know if you'd had a chance to watch the race, but Truex dominant. He led the number escapes me, but he's like 240 laps or something ridiculous. Had like a 10, 12-second lead the whole race. And then out of nowhere, Larson got it together and started coming. And all of a sudden, with about 15, 20 laps to go, Truex talking to his spotter, Larson shows up in his rearview mirror, and Truex goes, "Is that him?" And all of a sudden, the last 20 laps got interesting, but Truex almost drove off the road when he saw Larson in the rearview mirror because he had been so far ahead. But
248 laps led for Truex last week out of 293. So a dominant performance, to say the least, there at Darlington. And a great performance, as always, on today's show from Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline.
Look at you. Yeah, well done.
I've done this show a time or two. I think I kind of got it down at this point in time. And speaking of which, you've done your shows a time or two as well, and they're always great. And where can people check them out?
We are on Sports Grid Radio Network, Series 204, 2 to 4 Eastern weekdays. Today, Vinny Magliulo will join us, and Tony Neville from Treasure Island. So we love getting the sportsbook directors from Vegas on. And then Vegas Hockey Hotline is 1 Pacific at kshp.com. And we are really heating things up here with the home stretch for the Stanley Cup playoffs. You can get all the show links, all the information on my Twitter at Brian Blessing.
Oh, make sure.
And we do videos for a certain somebody I know.
Yeah, we'll have the Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year videos posted over on our ATS YouTube page here this afternoon. Brian, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me. Appreciate your time as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, pal. Always fun.
There you go. There's Brian Blessing again, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Follow him on Twitter at Brian Blessing. Coming up on Thursday, another edition of The Bettor's Box, my MLB betting podcast. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again on Thursday.